You're crouched in 6 inches of dry grass in the Rift Valley, wind in your face, heart doing something it shouldn't be doing at this volume. 40 yards out, a lioness lifts her head. She's not hunting you. She's not hunting anything, actually. She's just resting, ears rotating like little satellite dishes, tracking a world you can barely perceive. Then a sound reaches her. Not a roar, not a stampede. A human voice, low, from a speaker hidden in the bush, playing back a recorded conversation at conversational volume. She's up and gone in under 2 seconds. Faster than she'd have left for an actual lion, faster than she'd have left for a gunshot played at the same volume. She ran from a chat between two people about nothing in particular, and she ran like her life depended on it. Because, statistically, it kinda does. Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I ended up here. Oh, hey there. Sorry, I get a little dramatic with the openings. Force of habit. When you've been dead as long as I have, you learn that nobody's listening to careful, measured introductions. They're listening for the part where something goes wrong. So I lead with the part where something goes wrong. I didn't die from that lioness, for the record. I died decades ago doing something profoundly stupid involving a hippo in a canoe, which is a story for another day and possibly another video. Since then, I've been doing what dead wildlife nerds apparently do with eternity. I follow animals around. Not in a haunting way, more like a very patient, very invisible field biologist with an unlimited grant and no bladder to worry about. I've watched that lioness and thousands like her flinch from the sound of a human voice, more than they flinch from the roar of an actual predator. And once you notice that, you start noticing it everywhere. Elk that go nocturnal the second hiking season starts. Fish they get harder to catch within a single generation. Birds that change their entire love songs because we're too loud to sing over. So that's what this is. 20-some-odd years of eavesdropping on the animal kingdom's group chat about us. And their opinion of humans is a lot weirder and a lot more specific than scary. Let's get into it. Here's the thing nobody tells you in school. Every predator on Earth follows more or less the same rulebook. Wolves take the old, the sick, the young, the unlucky. Lions target the stragglers. Sharks go for the wounded seal, not the Olympic swimmer seal. It's not mercy, it's math. Chasing down the healthiest, strongest animal in the herd costs more energy than it returns. Evolution punishes bad math. So predators across the board specialize in the easy meal. Then along comes us. A landmark ecological analysis published in the journal Science looked at human hunting and fishing pressure across land and sea and found something genuinely bizarre. Humans routinely kill adult prey, the biggest, strongest, most reproductively valuable animals, at rates many times higher than any other predator on the planet. We don't cull the weak, we mount the strong on our walls. We call it a trophy. Every other predator on Earth is trying to conserve energy. We're the only one that'll burn a full tank of gas, take 3 days off work, and pay a guide specifically to kill the most impressive individual in the population. This is less apex predator and more a toddler who wants the biggest slice of cake regardless of the cost. Evolution looked at every other hunting strategy on the planet, agreed they made sense, and then just quietly stepped aside while we did whatever this is. And prey animals have noticed. Not consciously, nobody's holding a seminar in the reeds, but across generations, populations that get hit hard by human hunting or fishing start changing. Fish that are harvested by size limits evolve to mature smaller and younger, essentially getting out of the keeper range before we can catch them. It's not a plan, it's just what's left over after you've been sieving out anyone who grows too impressively for a few decades straight. Which brings us to something even stranger. Most predators need to actually be present to matter. A wolf that's 3 valleys over isn't affecting an elk's dinner plans tonight. But here's a wild one. A 2019 study broadcasting recordings of human voices to wildlife across multiple continents found that the mere sound of people talking, not shouting, not shooting, just talking, was enough to send animals from lions to badgers to elephants running, and running faster and farther than they ran from recordings of actual predators, including lions themselves. Let that sit for a second. Lions are scared of us more than they're scared of lions. We've become what researchers have started calling a super predator, not because we're stronger or faster or better equipped than the local carnivores, though we're also that. It's because our reputation now precedes us. An animal doesn't need to have personally survived a human encounter to be afraid of the concept of one. Fear of us appears to travel faster than we do. What is actually going through its head? This is the part where I have to be honest with you, because I promised myself I wouldn't turn into one of those overconfident nature narrators who assigns thoughts to animals like I've got a direct line to their inner monologue. Nobody knows exactly what's happening behind a lion's eyes when a stranger's voice hits her eardrum, but here's what's likely based on how fear and threat detection circuits generally work across mammals. An ancient part of the brain, the amygdala, is running threat assessment on autopilot, comparing the sound against a mental library of known danger. And for that lioness, human voice apparently scored higher than lion roar. That's not thought exactly, that's something closer to instinct that's been recalibrated by experience, hers or her mother's, or the population's collective bad history with us. Consider it less she is afraid of humans, and more her nervous system has quietly updated its risk model, and we are now the top line item.
Fast fact 1. Cheetahs hunt during the day partly to avoid competition from lions and hyenas, who prefer dusk and dawn. In areas with heavy tourism, cheetahs have been documented shifting their hunting windows even earlier, essentially rearranging their entire schedule around when the safari vehicles show up. We didn't just become a predator to them, we became a scheduling conflict. Here's one that genuinely surprised the people studying it. A large-scale review of wildlife camera trap data from 6 continents, looking at over 60 species, found that when humans move into or increase activity in an area, a huge number of mammals shift their behavior toward nighttime, even species that are normally active during the day. On average, across the study, animals increased their nocturnal activity by something like 1/3 just from human presence alone, regardless of whether we were actually hunting them or just going for a walk. Deer that would happily graze at noon in an empty landscape start doing it exclusively after dark once hikers show up. Wild boar, coyotes, even some birds, all quietly rearranging their entire day around avoiding us, the way you'd rearrange your grocery run to avoid your loud coworker from the office. This is where it gets almost insulting if you think about it from the animal side. We're not even hunting most of these populations. Plenty of them just have to deal with joggers, and their nervous systems have concluded that avoiding the joggers is worth flipping their entire biological clock upside down. You thought you'd politely coexist with local wildlife by staying on the marked trail. Spoiler, the wildlife filed that under still a threat, just a scenic one. Myth 1, true or false? Myth: predators only change prey behavior by actually killing them. Verdict: false, and not by a small margin. Reality: ecologists distinguish between the lethal effect of a predator, the actual killing, and the non-lethal or fear effect, which is everything an animal does differently just because a predator might be around. And in study after study, the fear effect turns out to be enormous. Elk in Yellowstone changed where they grazed, how often they looked up instead of eating, and how much time they spent in risky but tasty valley bottoms, all based on wolf presence, even in years where wolves weren't killing very many elk at all. The mere possibility of you is doing most of the behavioral work. This is why our vocal recordings can outscare an actual lion. We don't even need a body count. Our reputation is doing overtime. Which honestly tracks. Humans are the only species I've ever watched that can ruin a beach for an entire colony of birds without laying a single hand on a single bird, just by existing loudly near the shoreline. You're a ground-nesting plover, and it's April, and you've picked what seemed like a perfectly reasonable stretch of beach for your nest. Then the season starts. Not hunting season, tourist season. Every day, dozens of enormous bipedal animals wander past, sometimes stopping within a few feet of your eggs, and you don't know if this is the one that finds the nest, so you fly up in alarm again and again, dozens of times a day, every single time burning calories you don't have to spare, and leaving your eggs exposed to actual predators like gulls and raccoons for those extra seconds. You never get hunted, you get slowly bankrupted by anxiety, one beach walker at a time. Multiple studies on shorebird nesting success have found exactly this, not humans directly destroying nests, but chronic disturbance driving down survival rates all on its own, through stress and exposure, not teeth. That's the sneaky thing about us. We don't have to be predators in the traditional sense to functionally behave like one. Vision isn't even the main channel here. A lot of prey species are keying in on something you'd never think to hide, our smell. Research on wild boar and other mammals across Europe has found that animals respond to human scent alone, without any visual or auditory cue, by increasing vigilance and avoidance, sometimes for hours after the scent trail was laid. Deer have been shown to alter their movement around areas that simply carry lingering human odor, treating our scent trail that was they'd treat the scent trail of an actual predator marking territory. You leave scent-based warning signs in the forest just by walking through it. You, right now, are probably several hours away from any wild animal, and there's a non-zero chance that somewhere out there, a deer just changed its evening plans because of a shirt you wore last Tuesday. Let's put a number on all this, because vague dread doesn't really land unless you can compare it to something. That earlier super predator analysis found that humans, on average, kill adult prey animals at rates estimated to be many times. Some comparisons put it in the range of roughly 10 times or more than the typical rates other marine and terrestrial predators impose on their prey populations. To put that in a scale you can actually feel, imagine every other predator on the planet is playing a video game on normal difficulty, carefully rationing their attempts, going for easy kills to conserve resources. We showed up, switched the difficulty to easy mode for ourselves and hard mode for everyone else, and started speedrunning the strongest bosses first. And honestly, unlike a video game, the population doesn't respawn with the same stats. It respawns smaller, younger, and twitchier, because those are the individuals that slipped through. Fast fact 2. Commercial fishing pressure on Atlantic cod over the 20th century is one of the most studied examples of this. As larger, older fish were preferentially removed generation after generation, the average size and age of maturity in several cod populations measurably declined. The fish, in effect, evolved to grow up and reproduce earlier and smaller, essentially trying to sneak in a generation before we could catch them. We didn't just change how many cod there were, we changed what a cod is.
Here's where I have to give humans a backhanded compliment. As a physical predator, we're kind of a joke. No claws worth mentioning, teeth that couldn't crack a decent-sized bone, we're slower than a golden retriever over open ground. Any self-respecting apex predator committee would have rejected our application decades before we evolved language. And yet, we invented tools that let us kill from 400 yards away. We invented boats that let us pull entire schools of fish out of the ocean in a single afternoon. We invented drones, thermal scopes, GPS collars for tracking, snares that don't need us present at all. Every other predator on this planet is bound by its own body. A cheetah can only run so fast because that's the ceiling evolution built into cheetah legs. We built our own ceiling and then kept building past it, generation after generation, without waiting for natural selection's permission. This is the part where the animal kingdom's risk assessment genuinely breaks. A gazelle can learn roughly how fast a cheetah is and budget its escape distance accordingly. That math has worked for millions of years. It cannot budget for us because our capabilities change faster than any prey species can evolve a response. We're a predator with a patch update. Not every species is losing this arms race, though, and this next bit might be the closest thing to good news in the whole video. Urban coyotes in multiple North American cities have been documented learning to look both ways and use crosswalks, waiting for a break in traffic rather than darting across. Nobody trained them. There's no coyote driving school. It's straightforward operant conditioning. The coyotes that didn't figure out how traffic worked didn't survive long enough to teach the behavior to anyone, and the ones that did. A few generations of brutal selection, and suddenly you've got an animal quietly outsmarting a species that invented the automobile. I love this one specifically because it means the smug feeling you get watching a squirrel almost get flattened by a delivery truck is statistically survivorship bias. The squirrels that survive us are the ones learning our rules. We're not just changing what animals do. In a handful of remarkable cases, we're accidentally teaching a graduate seminar in urban navigation, and some of them are getting straight A's. Let's talk about noise, because I don't think people appreciate how much of an animal's world is built on sound and how thoroughly we've trashed the acoustics. Birds communicate territory, mating availability, and alarm calls almost entirely through song, tuned over millions of years to travel efficiently through the specific frequencies of their specific habitat. Then humans build a road or a city, and suddenly the ambient noise floor jumps into exactly the low-frequency range a lot of birdsong occupies. Research on urban birds, including studies on great tits and several other songbird species, has found they respond by singing at a higher pitch in noisy areas, essentially shouting in falsetto to be heard over our racket.
It works, technically. It also comes with side effects. Mates, in some studies, respond less favorably to the altered songs, since pitch and complexity often carry information about a male's fitness that gets lost when he's basically yelling over traffic instead of performing his normal repertoire. Imagine trying to propose marriage at a construction site permanently for your entire adult life, and also your future children's judgment of your character depends partly on how well you manage to shout the proposal. That is essentially urban bird dating. Whales have it worse, honestly, and at a scale that's hard to picture. Ocean shipping traffic has raised background noise levels across huge stretches of ocean, and low-frequency whale calls, the ones used for long-distance communication and finding mates across dozens or even hundreds of miles, get drowned out or forced to compete with engine noise from container ships. Some researchers have compared the effect to trying to have a conversation at a rock concert that never ever ends, and that you can't leave because the rock concert is basically everywhere the shipping lanes go. Fast Fact 3. A well-known study on Pacific killer whales found they lengthen their calls in the presence of vessel noise, essentially the acoustic equivalent of talking slower and louder when someone doesn't understand you the first time. It works about as well for whales as it does for you when you do it to someone who doesn't speak your language on vacation, which is to say, somewhat, but not as much as they'd like. Here's a plot twist most other predators would find genuinely offensive. Sometimes we're not hunting the animal at all. Sometimes we're actively feeding it, on purpose or by accident, and that turns out to be almost as disruptive as trying to kill it. Bears that learn to associate campgrounds or worse, unsecured trash with an easy meal will return again and again, teach the behavior to cubs, and in many documented cases, end up euthanized specifically because they've become too comfortable around people, a fate wildlife agencies bluntly summarize as a fed bear is a dead bear. We didn't hunt that bear, we just handed it enough calories that it stopped being appropriately afraid of us, and appropriate fear of us turns out to be one of the only things keeping a lot of large mammals alive in a human-dominated landscape. Myth 2, true or false? Myth, feeding wildlife is a harmless kindness. Verdict, false, almost every time, even when it feels wonderful in the moment.
Reality, animals that lose their wariness of humans through feeding tend to lose more than just table manners. They lose the caution that keeps them away from roads, from conflict with pets and livestock, from other humans who aren't nearly as friendly as you were. Wildlife biologists have a term for this, habituation, and it's one of the few things on this list that we can actually undo some damage from, just by resisting the urge to hand a chip to a chipmunk that's giving you very convincing puppy dog eyes. I get it, I really do. I once died partly because I underestimated an animal's motivations. Don't be like me. Keep the trail mix to yourself. You're a red fox on the edge of a suburb, and for 3 winters running, an elderly man in a green coat has left food scraps by the same fence post every evening around dusk. You've stopped waiting for full dark. You've started showing up earlier, closer to when actual humans are still out walking dogs, because the food is reliable and the reward outweighs the risk. Then the man moves away. The food stops, but your fear of daylight, of dogs, of proximity to human houses doesn't come back on the same schedule the food left on. For weeks, you're caught in the worst version of this deal. No free meal, and none of your old caution either. This exact pattern, wildlife showing up bolder and earlier around reliable food sources and staying bolder even after the source disappears, has been documented in foxes, raccoons, and gulls across multiple studies on urban wildlife habituation. Kindness, it turns out, has a lag time, and the animal pays the bill after we've already left the table. Here's something genuinely unique about us, and I say this as someone who has watched an enormous number of predators do their thing with zero apparent moral hand-wringing. We're the only predator on this planet, as far as anyone can tell, that sometimes deliberately protects the exact populations it also hunts. National parks, fishing quotas, breeding programs for species we drove to the edge in the first place, conservation reintroductions of wolves into landscapes we personally emptied of wolves a century earlier. No lion has ever organized a captive breeding program for gazelles out of guilt. No orcapod has ever voted to enforce seasonal limits on seal hunting to protect long-term seal population health. We're the rare predator that occasionally looks at the thing it's eating, feels bad, and tries to fix the math retroactively, sometimes successfully. Gray wolves, bald eagles, and humpback whales are all populations that went through serious human-driven collapse and then measurably recovered, at least in part because humans specifically decided to stop being quite so relentless about it. It's a strange kind of predator that hunts something almost to oblivion and then spends the next 50 years trying to undo it. I don't fully know what to do with that, honestly, even after all this time. It's the most contradictory thing I've ever watched a species do, and I've watched a badger try to bury an entire dead deer by itself, so that's saying something. Fast Fact 4. Yellowstone's wolf reintroduction in the 1990s is one of the most cited examples of a human decision reshaping an entire ecosystem. The return of wolves changed elk grazing behavior enough that some researchers documented shifts in vegetation along certain riverbanks, which in turn affected beaver activity and stream structure in those areas. Scientists still debate how large and universal that cascade really was, but the basic shape of it, one predator's return rippling outward through the whole system, is a solid, well-documented example of just how much weight a single species presence, including ours, can throw around. So, here's where all this lands if you zoom out far enough. Every predator on Earth writes a set of rules that its prey can eventually learn, predict, and budget around. Fast enough to outrun, quiet enough to hide from, patterned enough to schedule your life around. It's a very old, very stable arrangement, and honestly, it works. Predators and prey have been doing this dance since long before anything with a spine crawled out of the ocean. Then we showed up. Slow, clawless, not particularly frightening on paper, and somehow the single most unpredictable variable most ecosystems on this planet have ever had to model. We kill the strong instead of the weak. We're terrifying by voice alone, from a hidden speaker, without a body in sight. We change our tools faster than evolution can respond to them. We sometimes feed the exact species we hunt. We occasionally, bizarrely, try to undo our own damage decades later. No consistent rulebook, no stable pattern, just an enormous, loud, oddly guilty animal that keeps changing the rules of the game mid-round. If you were designing the single hardest predator in the history of the planet for other species to adapt to, on paper, you'd struggle to invent something stranger than us. Evolution had 4 billion years to prepare Earth's animals for predators. It did not remotely prepare them for HR meetings, drone footage, and guilt. Look, I'm not going to pretend this turned into a moral lecture because that's against the rules I apparently set for myself, but I do actually mean this next part. Here's what I'd tell you if I could have told myself back when I still had the reflexes to use it. 1. Your voice alone can trigger a full flight response in wild animals from a huge distance, so if you actually want to observe wildlife without disturbing it, staying quiet matters more than staying hidden. 2. Feeding wild animals doesn't feel like a threat to you, but it functionally rewired their risk calculations, and that rewiring usually ends badly for them, not for you. 3. Human scent lingers and gets read as a warning sign, so if you're hiking through sensitive habitat, understand that your presence outlasts your visit for hours. 4. If you're fishing or hunting recreationally, understand that you are mathematically one of the least selective predators on the planet. The biggest catch is not a neutral trophy, it's a withdrawal from the gene pool's savings account.
5. Nesting birds and denning animals treat repeated casual disturbance as serious as an actual attack, even if you never touch anything. Give real distance, especially in spring. 6. Nighttime wildlife activity near human areas often isn't animals being naturally nocturnal. It's animals rearranging their entire lives around avoiding you, which should honestly make you feel a little bad and a little flattered. 7. A habituated wild animal, one that's lost its fear of people, is usually a soon-to-be-dead wild animal. Your friendliness is frequently a death sentence with a delay on it. 8. Conservation actually works, repeatedly when we decide to let it. Wolves, eagles, whales, so the guilt is useful, as long as you turn it into policy instead of just a nice feeling. That's really it. 8 things. I had a lot longer to learn them than you do, which feels like it should count for something. I've spent longer being dead now than I spent being alive, and somewhere in there I stopped thinking of myself as separate from the wildlife I follow around. You're all just animals figuring out an impossible predator that keeps changing its own rules. So am I, honestly. I just don't have to worry about the predator part anymore. Be the weird one. Be the unpredictable variable. Just try every once in a while to be the good kind of strange, instead of the kind that makes a lioness run from your voice. If you want more videos like this, subscribe.